PEC Education is one of the leading PTE test training providers in Dhaka, Bangladesh. PEC Education started its journey in 2016 with providing one-stop PTE academic supports and services. There are several PTE courses that PEC offers both online and on campus to its students. All of the PTE courses includes PTE study materials and free PTE mock tests. Please call for detailed information PTE course preparation and services to 01713167969 or visit the website www.pecpte.com.
Cell division is an intricate chemical dance that's part individual, part community driven. And in a neighborhood of 100 trillion cells, sometimes things go wrong. Maybe an individual cell's set of instructions, or DNA, gets a typo, what we call a mutation. Most of the time, the cell senses mistakes and shuts itself down, or the system detects a troublemaker and eliminates it. But enough mutations can bypass the fail-safes, driving the cell to divide recklessly. That one rogue cell becomes 2, then 4, then 8. At every stage, the incorrect instructions are passed along to the cell's offspring. Weeks, months, or years after that one rogue cell transformed, you might see your doctor about a lump in your breast. Difficulty going to the bathroom could reveal a problem in your intestine, prostate, or bladder. Or, a routine blood test might count too many white cells or elevated liver enzymes. Your doctor delivers the bad news: it's cancer.
The speaker is talking about cell dividing system and also says when something goes wrong in this process it is called mutations. Mostly, cells get rid of this type of mistakes, but if there is already adequate mutations the safety locks doesn't work and cell dividing goes on uncontrollably, which comes out as a lump to doctors. This lump then ends up in cancer.
Light up the world. After witnessing the violent rage shown by babies whenever deprived of an item they considered their own, Jean Piaget, a founding father of child psychology, observed something profound about human nature. Our sense of ownership emerges incredibly early. Why are we so clingy? There's a well-established phenomenon in psychology known as the endowment effect. Although feelings of ownership emerge early in life, culture also plays a part. For example, it was recently discovered that Hadza people of northern Tanzania who are isolated from modern culture don't exhibit the endowment effect. That's possibly because they live in an egalitarian society where almost everything is shared. At the other extreme, sometimes our attachment to our things can go too far. Part of the cause of hoarding disorder is an exaggerated sense of responsibility and protectiveness toward one's belongings. That's why people with this condition find it so difficult to throw anything away.
The speaker talks about how babies become fierce when they are not given the things that they had in their possession before. A psychological phenomenon, which can lead people to have difficulty in throwing things away, is held responsible for this. The speaker puts an example of Hadza people, who are still in egalitarian society, do not have these kinds of problems as they live in a shared culture. But people with overprotectiveness and duty sense can go extreme.
Sunscreen as we know it today didn't exist 50,000 years ago. So how did our ancestors cope with this onslaught of UV? The key to survival lay in their own personal sunscreen manufactured beneath the skin, melanin. The type and amount of melanin in your skin determines whether you'll be more or less protected from the sun. This comes down to the skin's response as sunlight strikes it. When it's exposed to UV light, that triggers special light-sensitive receptors called rhodopsin, which stimulate the production of melanin to shield cells from damage. For light-skinned people, that extra melanin darkens their skin and produces a tan. Over the course of generations, humans living at the sun-saturated latitudes in Africa adapted to have a higher melanin production threshold and more eumelanin, giving skin a darker tone. This built-in sun shield helped protect him from melanoma, likely making him evolutionarily fitter and capable of passing this useful trait on to new generations.
The speaker talks about how people in ancient times used to prevent themselves from UV. Melanin was their weapon. When the light hits the body, it produces rhodopsin to fuel the melanin production, maintaining a damage shield. That's why people can have tan while they are out in the sun, and African people have higher level of melanin and eumelanin, which makes them darker. This integrated sunscreen protected people from melanoma.
In the late 17th century, a medical student named Johannes Hofer noticed a strange illness affecting Swiss mercenaries serving abroad. Its symptoms, including fatigue, insomnia, irregular heartbeat, indigestion, and fever, were so strong, the soldiers often had to be discharged. As Hofer discovered, the cause was not some physical disturbance, but an intense yearning for their mountain homeland. He dubbed the condition nostalgia, from the Greek nostos for homecoming and algos for pain or longing. At first, nostalgia was considered a particularly Swiss affliction. Some doctors proposed that the constant sound of cowbells in the Alps caused trauma to the eardrums and brain. Commanders even forbade their soldiers from singing traditional Swiss songs for fear that they'd lead to desertion or suicide. But as migration increased worldwide, nostalgia was observed in various groups. It turned out that anyone separated from their native place for a long time was vulnerable to nostalgia. And by the early 20th century, professionals no longer viewed it as a neurological disease, but as a mental condition similar to depression.
The speaker is talking about the discovery of nostalgia. A medical student named Hofer named this problem's nostalgia, as he noticed that the soldiers serving abroad were having various symptoms similar to each other, which was also seen as neurological disease. After the increment of migration process, this kind of problem was seen in migrated people, and now, it is taken as a mental state similar to depression.
The benefits of being left-handed are clearest in activities involving an opponent, like combat or competitive sports. For example, about 50% of top hitters in baseball have been left-handed. Why? Think of it as a surprise advantage. Because lefties are a minority to begin with, both right-handed and left-handed competitors will spend most of their time encountering and practicing against righties. So when the two face each other, the left-hander will be better prepared against this right-handed opponent, while the righty will be thrown off. This fighting hypothesis, where an imbalance in the population results in an advantage for left-handed fighters or athletes, is an example of negative frequency-dependent selection. But according to the principles of evolution, groups that have a relative advantage tend to grow until that advantage disappears. If people were only fighting and competing throughout human evolution, natural selection would lead to more lefties being the ones that made it until there were so many of them, that it was no longer a rare asset. So in a purely competitive world, 50% of the population would be left-handed.
The speaker talks about how being lefty can be an asset. He also gives example of baseball players being lefties and again how thoroughly prepared they are in terms of playing with righties. However, it is in the principle of evolution that a group cannot go any further if they are only based on their advantageous part. So, if lefties are considered the natural fighters and competitors, then they wouldn't be sporadic anymore.